Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UE's Defiance, watching the massive alien ship grow larger on his main screen. The vessel was 3 times the size of his own ship and covered in dark metal that seemed to eat light. Strange symbols glowed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Sir, they're sending us a message," said Lieutenant Amy Davis from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and steady hands that never shook even when things got bad. Jake had picked her for this mission because she kept her head when others lost theirs. "Put it through," Jake said. He was 42 years old and had spent half his life in space. He had seen pirates, asteroid miners gone crazy, and corporate wars fought in the dark between stars. But he had never seen anything like the ship hanging in space before them. The main screen flickered and showed a creature that made Jake's skin crawl. It looked like a cross between a lizard and a machine, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed red and a face covered with scales. When it spoke, its voice came through the translator as cold and flat. "I am War Commander Thek of the Corvin Empire. You will surrender your ship and prepare to receive tribute terms from the Galactic Trade Council." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew of 37 men and women had left Earth 6 months ago to start humanity's first colony beyond the solar system. They carried farming equipment, medical supplies, and enough materials to build a new world. They were explorers, not warriors. "Tribute terms?" Jake asked. "We're just colonists. We don't even know who you are." The alien's mouth opened to show rows of sharp teeth. "Ignorance is not an excuse. All species that enter council space must pay tribute. 60% of your resources, 60% of your technology, and 60% of your population will be transferred to council control. This is the law." Amy turned from her station, her face pale. "Sir, they're scanning our ship." "Deep scans. They're reading everything, including our personnel files." Jake felt his stomach turn cold. 60% of their population meant 22 people. Men and women who had families back on Earth. People who had trusted him to lead them to a new life among the stars. "What if we refuse?" Jake asked. The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Refusal is not permitted. You will comply or you will be destroyed. These are the only options given to new species." Jake looked at his crew again. Chief Engineer Roy Chun sat at the engine controls, his face hard with anger. Dr. Kate Sullivan stood near the medical station, her hands clenched into fists. Pilot Steve Collins gripped his controls so tight his knuckles were white. "How long do we have to decide?" Jake asked. "You have 1 of your hours," the alien said. "Use this time to select which of your people will be transferred. Choose wisely. The council prefers skilled workers and fertile females." The transmission ended, and the screen went back to showing the alien ship. Jake felt rage building in his chest like a fire that wanted to burn everything around it. "Sir?" Amy asked quietly. "What are your orders?" Jake thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was 16 and wanted to be a doctor like Dr. Sullivan. He thought about the families of his crew, the people who had said goodbye, thinking they would see their loved ones again in 5 years. When the next ship arrived, "Amy, how long would it take to overload our mining lasers?" She checked her console. "Maybe 10 minutes, sir, but they're not weapons. They're designed to cut through rock." "Roy," Jake called to his engineer, "we still have that cargo hold full of asteroid ore, right? The volatile stuff we picked up in the belt?" Roy nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. Enough to blow a hole in a small moon if it goes off all at once." "And Steve, how fast can this ship move if we push the engines past safety limits?" The pilot ran his hands over his controls. "Fast enough, sir, but not fast enough to outrun that monster." Jake smiled for the first time since the alien ship had appeared. I wasn't thinking about running away. Dr. Sullivan stepped forward. Captain, you can't be serious. That's suicide. Maybe, Jake said. But I'd rather die fighting than watch. Half my crew get dragged away as slaves. Amy was already working at her station. Sir, if we reroute power from life support and navigation, we can overload the mining array in 8 minutes. The beam will cut through their hull, but we'll have to get close. How close? Jake asked, ramming distance. The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of the ship's systems. Everyone understood what Jake was planning. The escape pods could maybe get them away from the explosion, but maybe was not the same as certainly. All hands, this is the captain, Jake said into the ship-wide comm. We've been given an ultimatum by something called the Galactic Trade Council. They want 60% of everything we have, including 22 members of our crew. I'm not going to let that happen. He paused and looked around the bridge one more time. Anyone who wants to take an escape pod and surrender can do so now. No shame in it. But I'm going to ram that alien ship and show them what humans think of their tribute demands. A comm crackled with responses from all over the ship. Not one person asked to leave. Roy, start moving that ore to the forward cargo bay. Amy, begin the overload sequence. Steve, plot a ramming course, but keep it quiet until I give the word. Dr. Sullivan, get the escape pods ready for emergency launch. Sir, Amy said, the alien ship is moving closer. I think they're getting impatient. Good, let them come. The closer they get, the better this will work. Jake opened a channel to the Corvin ship. The ugly face of War Commander Thek appeared. On screen again. Your time is almost up, human. Have you selected your tribute? Jake stood up straight and looked directly into those glowing red eyes. Yeah, I've got your tribute right here. He nodded to Steve, who pushed the engines to maximum power. The Defiance shot forward like a bullet, heading straight for the alien ship. At the same time, Amy triggered the mining laser overload, and Roy detonated the cargo hold full of volatile ore. The alien ship tried to turn away, but it was too big and too slow. The Defiance, now more of a guided missile than a ship, punched through its shields and crashed into its hull just as the mining lasers and exploding ore turned the human ship into a ball of fire. Jake felt the escape pod launch, just as the explosion tore both ships apart. Through the small window, he watched pieces of the alien vessel spinning away into space, leaking atmosphere and sparking with electrical fires. This is Captain Morrison to all pods, he said into his emergency radio. Anyone still alive out there? One by one, his crew checked in. 34 people had made it to the escape pods. They had lost 3 good people, but they were alive and free. As they waited for rescue. Jake looked out at the stars and wondered what would happen next. Humanity had just declared war on something called the Galactic Trade Council, and they didn't even know how big or powerful their new enemy was. But one thing was certain. When the council came looking for tribute again, they would find that humans had a very different idea about who owed what to whom. Admiral Lisa Harper stood in the command center of the UES Constitution, watching the holographic display that showed every human settlement in known space. Red dots marked the alien blockade ships that had appeared 6 months ago. The Galactic Trade Council had surrounded humanity like a pack of wolves circling wounded prey. Admiral, we just lost contact with New Texas Colony, reported Commander Bill Richards, her communications officer. He was a tall man with gray hair who had served with Lisa for 15 years. His voice stayed calm, but she could see the worry in his eyes. How long since their last transmission? Lisa asked. 18 hours. Their crops are failing without the mineral shipments from the mining stations. They have maybe 2 weeks of food left. Lisa nodded and turned to study the tactical display. 47 human settlements scattered across 12 star systems, all cut off from each other by alien ships. The Council had declared humanity a rogue species after Captain Narration destroyed their ship. Now they were slowly strangling human space. Waiting for surrender. Dr. Kate Sullivan entered the command center carrying a datapad. She had escaped from the Defiance incident and now served as chief medical officer for the entire human fleet. Her face looked tired and drawn from months of treating people suffering from malnutrition and disease. "Admiral, I have the latest reports from the outer colonies," Kate said. "Haven Point is down to emergency rations. New Geneva has an outbreak of something we can't identify without proper lab equipment. The medical supplies we need are sitting in warehouses on Earth, but we can't get them through the blockade." "What about the other colonies?" Lisa asked. "New Berlin is holding steady for now. They had better stockpiles. But Harmony Station lost their water recycling system yesterday. Without replacement parts, they have maybe a month before people start dying of thirst." Lisa felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. 3 million humans spread across space, all depending on her to find a way through this crisis. The Council kept broadcasting surrender terms, offering better and better deals as the months passed. First 60% tribute, then 50, then 40. Each offer came with images of human children on dying worlds. "Admiral, incoming transmission." "From the Council ship," said Richards. "It's their ambassador again." "Put it on screen." The main display showed a creature that looked like it was made of moving water and starlight. High Negotiator Veltar spoke in a voice that sounded like music, but Lisa had learned to hear the threat underneath the beauty. "Admiral Harper, surely. You can see that resistance is pointless. Your people suffer while you cling to meaningless pride. Accept our terms and your colonies will receive immediate aid." "What are your current terms?" Lisa asked, though she already knew the answer. 30% of your resources and technology, 20% of your population, selected by lottery to ensure fairness. In return, your species will be granted full protection under Council law. Lisa almost laughed. 20% of 3 million people meant 600,000 humans taken as slaves. She thought about her own daughter, Sarah, safe on Earth for now, but included in any lottery the Council might run. "And if we refuse? Then you will continue to suffer until you see reason." "The Council is patient, Admiral. We have waited centuries for species to accept their proper place. We can wait a few more months for humanity to understand reality." Lisa cut the transmission and turned to her staff. General Paul Martinez, her chief tactical advisor, stepped forward. He was a short, stocky man with scars on his hands from combat. Engineering work. Paul had been working on something called Project Angry Hornet for months, but he kept the details secret even from Lisa. "General, please tell me you have good news," Lisa said. Paul smiled for the first time in weeks. "Admiral, I think it's time you saw what we've been building." He led Lisa and Kate through the ship's corridors to a sealed section near the engine room. The guards at the door stepped aside, and Paul entered his security code. Inside, Lisa found a workshop filled with strange devices and star charts covered in calculations. "We call them ghost chips," Paul explained, pointing to a model on the central table. "Converted freighters and mining vessels equipped with experimental jump drives. They can appear anywhere in Council space, strike a target, and disappear before the aliens can respond." Kate picked up one of the devices from the workbench. "What's this?" "Mining charges, but modified. Each ghost ship carries enough explosives to level a city block. We're not targeting cities, though. We're going after infrastructure. Fuel depots, communication stations, supply lines." Lisa studied the star charts on the wall. Red X marks showed potential targets scattered across Council space. How many ships do we have? 52 ready to launch. Each one crewed by volunteers who know they probably won't come home. The plan is to hit them everywhere at once, force them to spread their forces thin trying to protect everything. That's suicide, Kate said quietly. Maybe, Paul replied, but it's better than slow death. By starvation. And if we can make the Council hurt badly enough, they might decide humanity is more trouble than we're worth. Lisa walked to the largest star chart and traced the lines showing jump routes between Council systems. The plan was dangerous and desperate, but it was also the only real choice they had. The blockade was working. In another 6 months, human colonies would start falling one by one. What do you need from me? She asked. Permission to launch. And a direct order, so the responsibility falls on you, not the volunteers. Lisa thought about the children on dying worlds, about families separated by alien blockades, about a species facing extinction or slavery. She thought about Captain Morrison, who had chosen to fight rather than submit. You have my permission, General. When do we start? Tomorrow. The first wave hits their supply depot at Arcturus Prime. The next morning, Lisa stood on the observation deck watching 52 ships disappear into jump space. Each one carried a crew of volunteers led by someone willing to die for humanity's freedom. Colonel Dan Foster commanded the first ship, along with engineer Maya Rodriguez and pilot Steve Collins. They were heading into Council space with enough explosives to destroy a space station. Lisa had sent them to their deaths, and they had gone. Willingly, hours passed with no word from the strike teams. Lisa paced the command center, checking and rechecking communications equipment. Kate brought her coffee and sat beside her, both women waiting for news that might never come. Finally, Richards looked up from his station with surprise on his face. Admiral, I'm getting reports from our intelligence network. Something big just happened at Arcturus Prime. What kind of reports? The Corvin supply depot is gone, completely destroyed. And there are similar reports coming in from across Council. Space, fuel refineries, communication hubs, military outposts. It looks like our people hit dozens of targets simultaneously. Lisa felt a mixture of relief and dread. The plan was working, but at a terrible cost. Any word from our ships? Some of them, yes. Colonel Foster's team made it out of Arcturus. So did about half the others. But Admiral, we lost 24 ships. Over 300 people. Lisa closed her eyes and added those names to the list of people who had died under her command. But when she opened them again, she saw something new on the tactical display. Several Council ships were moving away from human space, rushing back to defend their own territory. Richards, get me a channel to all human settlements, she said. Channel. Open, Admiral. Lisa looked directly into the camera, knowing her words would reach every human still alive in space. This is Admiral Harper. Today, we struck back against the Council that would make us slaves. We hurt them badly, and they're starting to realize that humanity won't go quietly into the dark. But this is just the beginning. They wanted tribute. From us. Before this is over, they're going to learn the real price of threatening human children. She cut the transmission and turned back to the tactical display. The blockade was weakening, but the Council would respond with greater force. They had started a war, and Lisa intended to finish it. General Martinez, how long before the second wave is ready? Paul checked his data pad. 48 hours, Admiral. But this time, we're not just hitting infrastructure. What's the target? Their primary military shipyard. We're going to make sure they can't build any more ships to threaten us with. Lisa nodded. The Council wanted to see humanity submit or die. Instead, they were about to learn what happened when humans got angry. Colonel Dan Foster watched the massive Corvin shipyard through his ship's view screen. The facility stretched for miles across space, its metal arms reaching out like the legs of a giant spider. Hundreds of alien workers moved between the construction bays where new warships were being built. This was where the Council made the weapons they used to threaten smaller species. "Maya, how are those fusion charges looking?" Dan asked his engineer. Maya Rodriguez had volunteered for this mission, knowing it was probably suicide. She was 28 years old with steady hands and a mind that could solve any technical problem. Her brother had died in the Council's attack on the medical convoy 3 weeks ago. "Ready to go, Colonel," Maya said. "These aren't like the mining charges we used before. Dr. Walker designed them to crack open a moon. One charge in the right place will turn that shipyard into scrap metal." Dan nodded and turned to his pilot. Steve Collins had flown with Captain Morrison on the original mission and survived the Defiance explosion. He was quiet and careful, but Dan had seen him thread a ship through asteroid fields that would terrify most pilots. "Steve, can you get U.S. close enough to plant the charges without triggering their defense systems?" "Maybe," Steve said. "Their sensors are focused outward, watching for attacking fleets. A single ship coming from the asteroid belt might slip through. But once we plant the charges, every gun on that station will be shooting at us." Dan looked around his small bridge. 12 volunteers had signed up for this mission. They all knew the odds. The Corvin shipyard was the most heavily defended target humanity had ever attacked. But it was also the most important. Every day it operated, more ships rolled out to threaten human colonies. "All right, people, you know the plan. We go in quiet, plant the charges, and get out fast. If something goes wrong, complete the mission. Anyway, those fusion bombs will end the Council's ability to build new warships for years." Dan opened a channel to Admiral Harper, back at Human Command. Her face appeared on his screen, looking tired but determined. Behind her, he could see the busy activity of the war room where humanity's survival was planned one desperate operation at a time. "Admiral, we're beginning our approach to the target," Dan reported. "Good luck, Colonel. The whole fleet is depending on you." Dan cut the transmission and settled back in his chair. Through the view screen, he could see the shipyard growing larger. As they approached, alien ships moved in and out of the construction bays like insects around a hive. None of them noticed the small human ship drifting toward them from the direction of empty space. 3 hours later, the UE's Retribution hung in space just outside the shipyard's defense perimeter. Dan could see Corvin guards patrolling the outer platforms, their lizard faces visible through the transparent aluminum of their helmets. They carried energy weapons that could cut through human armor like paper. "Maya, are you ready?" Dan asked. "Ready, sir. The charges are armed, and the timer is set for 30 minutes. That should give us time to get clear. Steve, take us in." The ship moved forward slowly, its engines barely firing. Steve had painted the hull with special coating that absorbed sensor beams, making them nearly invisible to Corvin detection. Equipment. They drifted past the outer guards and into the shipyard itself. Inside the facility, Dan could see the true scale of the Council's military power. Dozens of massive warships hung in construction cradles, each one large enough to destroy a human city. Thousands of alien workers moved between them, welding armor plates and installing weapon systems. This single facility could build enough ships to blockade 100 species. There, Maya pointed to a central power core that fed energy to the entire complex. "If we place the charges there, the explosion will chain react through the whole structure." Steve guided their ship toward the target, moving carefully between the construction arms and floating work platforms. They were close enough now to see individual aliens through their helmet visors. One Corvin engineer looked directly at their ship, but the absorption coating made them look like just another piece of floating debris. "Almost there," Steve whispered. That's when everything went wrong. A Corvin patrol ship rounded one of the construction arms and spotted them immediately. The alien vessel was small but fast, designed for close-range combat inside the shipyard. Its pilot began transmitting an alarm even as he opened fire with plasma cannons. "We're blown," Dan said calmly. "Maya, how long to plant those charges?" 2 minutes if I work fast. Steve, get us to that power core." Full speed. The small human ship shot forward as alarms began wailing throughout the shipyard. Defense turrets swiveled toward them, their targeting systems locking on. Plasma bolts filled the space around them as Steve threw the ship into a wild, evasive pattern. 30 seconds, Maya called out as she worked on the charges. More Corvin. Ships were launching from hidden bays inside the facility. Dan counted at least 6 interceptors moving to surround them. The nearest one fired a spread of missiles that Steve barely avoided by diving between 2 construction arms. "Got it," Maya said. "Charges are planted and armed. 28 minutes. Until detonation. Steve, get us out of here." But as they turned to flee, Dan saw that their path was blocked. Corvin ships had surrounded the shipyard, cutting off every escape route. The aliens had learned from humanity's previous hit-and-run attacks. This time they were ready. "Colonel, there's no way out," Steve said. "They've got us boxed in." Dan thought about Admiral Harper and the millions of humans depending on this mission. He thought about Maya's brother and all the other people who had died because the Council thought they could treat humanity like cattle. He thought about the children on the dying colonies who needed this shipyard destroyed to have any chance of survival. "Then we make our own way out," Dan said. "Steve, ram the nearest Corvin ship. We'll go through them instead of around them." "Sir, that's suicide." "Maybe, but those charges are going to detonate whether we're alive or dead. At least this way we take some of them with us." Steve nodded and pushed the engines to maximum power. The human ship shot toward the largest Corvin interceptor like a bullet. The alien pilot tried to turn away, but he was too slow. The ships collided in a burst of flame and twisted metal. The explosion threw Dan against his restraints, but when the sparks cleared, he saw they had punched through the Corvin formation. Space opened up ahead of them, dark and welcoming. "Jump drive is damaged," Steve reported, "but still functional. I can get us 1 jump away from here." "Do it." The ship disappeared into jump space just as the Corvin defense fleet converged on their last position. Dan watched the timer on Maya's detonator count down. 26 minutes. 25. 20-4. They emerged from jump space near a small asteroid where Admiral Harper had positioned a rescue ship. As their damaged vessel limped toward safety, Dan kept watching the timer. When it reached 0, a new star appeared in the direction of the Corvin shipyard. The explosion was visible even at this distance, a brilliant flash that lasted for several seconds before fading. Dan knew that when the light cleared, the Council's primary military facility would be nothing but expanding debris. "This is Colonel Foster to Admiral Harper," he transmitted. "Mission accomplished. The shipyard is destroyed." Harper's voice came back immediately, filled with relief and pride. "Well done, Colonel. How many of your people made it out?" Dan looked around his bridge. 8 of the 12 volunteers were still alive, bruised and bloodied, but breathing. They had struck the Council's most important target and lived to tell about it. 8 survivors, Admiral, and 1 very big hole where the enemy used to build their ships. But even as Dan celebrated their victory, he knew the real war was just beginning. The Council would be furious about the loss of their shipyard. They would respond with overwhelming force, sending everything they had to crush humanity once and for all. Admiral Harper's next transmission confirmed his fears. "Colonel, we're detecting massive fleet movements throughout Council space. They're mobilizing everything for a final assault on Earth itself. Get back here as fast as you can. We're going to need every ship we have for what's coming next." Admiral Lisa Harper stood on the bridge of the UEC Constitution, watching the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. 300 ships hung in space around Earth, from massive battleships to small fighters crewed by civilian volunteers. Every vessel capable of combat had been called home for the final battle. "Admiral, long-range sensors are picking up the Council fleet," reported Commander Bill Richards. His voice was steady, but Lisa could see the worry in his eyes. "There. 3 hours out and moving fast." "How many ships?" Lisa asked. "Over 1,000. Maybe 1,200. Every major Council species has sent their battle fleets." Lisa nodded calmly, though her heart was racing. The enemy outnumbered them 4-1, with ships that were bigger and better armed than anything humanity possessed. But numbers weren't everything. The Council expected humanity to cower behind Earth's defenses, begging for mercy. Instead, they were about to learn what humans did when their backs were against the wall. "General Martinez, are your special packages ready?" Lisa asked. Paul Martinez smiled grimly from his position at the tactical station. "All 50 fusion torpedoes are armed and loaded, Admiral. Dr. Walker's team outdid themselves. Each one can crack a moon in half." Lisa turned to Captain Alex Turner, who commanded the newest and most powerful ship in the human fleet. The Hughes. Retribution had been built specifically for this battle, incorporating every lesson learned from 2 years of desperate warfare. Alex was young, only 31, but he had proven himself in a dozen battles against Council forces. "Captain Turner, your ship will lead the attack. Take your squadron and punch a hole through their formation. The rest of the fleet will follow you through." "Understood, Admiral." "My people are ready." Lisa looked around the bridge at the men and women who had fought beside her through the darkest period in human history. Dr. Kate Sullivan was at the medical station, preparing for the casualties that would inevitably come. Colonel Dan Foster stood near the weapons console, having returned from his successful mission to destroy the Corvin shipyard. Engineer Maya Rodriguez worked at her station, making final adjustments to the ship's power systems. "All ships, this is Admiral Harper," Lisa said into the fleet-wide communication system. 2 years ago, the Galactic Trade Council demanded tribute from humanity. They wanted to take our resources, our technology, and our people. Today, we're going to show them what tribute really looks like. She paused and looked out at the stars where her fleet waited for orders. "They think we're weak because we're new to space. They think we'll surrender because we're outnumbered. They're about to learn the humans don't surrender. We fight. And when we fight, we win." The fleet responded with a roar of approval that filled the communication channels. 300 ships began moving toward the edge of the solar system, where the Council Armada was approaching like a dark cloud of metal. And Death, High Negotiator Veltar, stood in the command center of the Council flagship, watching the human fleet advance. The creature that looked like moving water and starlight felt something resembling amusement as it observed the pathetic human response. "They bring only 300 ships against our 1,200, said War Commander Thek of the Corvin Empire. The lizard-like alien had demanded the right to lead this final assault after humans destroyed his precious shipyard. "This will be over quickly." "Perhaps too quickly," Veltar replied. "The Council would prefer to capture as many humans alive as possible. Their defiance has been amusing, but now they must be taught proper respect." The first ships to meet were the scout forces, light vessels that tested each other's defenses before the main battle began. Council ships opened fire with plasma cannons and particle beams, weapons that had conquered 100 worlds. But the human ships didn't behave as expected. Instead of forming defensive lines, they scattered in all directions using hit and run. Tactics that made them difficult targets. Captain Alex Turner brought the retribution through the enemy's scout line like a knife through paper. His ship's experimental shields held against alien weapons, while his fusion torpedoes turned 3 council vessels into expanding clouds of debris. Behind him, the human fleet poured through the gap he had created. All ships concentrate fire on their command vessels, Admiral Harper ordered. Take out their leadership, and the rest will fall apart. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Council ships fought in rigid formations, following tactics that had worked for thousands of years. Human vessels moved like wolves, working in small packs to isolate and destroy individual targets. When the aliens adapted to one strategy, the humans switched to another. War. Commander Thek watched in growing alarm as his carefully planned assault turned into chaos. Human ships appeared where they shouldn't be, struck where he wasn't defending, and vanished before his counterattacks could destroy them. His fleet outnumbered the enemy 4-1, but somehow they were losing ships faster than the humans were. How is this possible? He demanded. They have inferior technology and fewer ships. High Negotiator Veltar studied the tactical display with something approaching fear. The humans weren't just fighting desperately like cornered animals. They were fighting intelligently, using tactics that turned the Council's size and power against itself. Order all ships to fall back and regroup, Veltar commanded. We need to. The transmission was cut off as Captain Turner's fusion torpedo struck the Council flagship's command section. The massive vessel broke apart in a ball of nuclear fire, taking both alien leaders with it. Without central command, the Council fleet began to fragment. Different species started giving contradictory orders to their ships. The Zeraxi hive mind tried to coordinate through their mental link, but human jammers disrupted their communications. Corvin ships fought with desperate fury, but they were too few without their allies. Admiral Harper saw the enemy formation collapsing and pressed her advantage. All ships full assault, don't let them regroup. The human fleet struck like a hammer, driving deep into the Council ranks. Maya Rodriguez's engineering teams had modified their weapons to overload on impact, turning each ship into a potential bomb. Colonel Foster led bombing runs that crippled enemy capital ships. Dr. Sullivan coordinated rescue operations that saved human crews from damaged vessels. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the space around Earth was filled with the wreckage of over 800 Council ships. The human fleet had lost 97 vessels, but they had won the most complete victory in their history. Admiral, we're receiving surrender transmissions from the surviving Council ships, reported Commander Richards. They're requesting permission to retreat. Lisa looked at the tactical display, showing the scattered remnants of the enemy fleet. Ships that had once threatened to enslave humanity now limped away with their shields down and weapons powered off. Grant them safe passage, she said, but make sure they understand the new rules. Lisa opened a channel to broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every species in the galaxy would hear her words. This is Admiral Harper of the human fleet. The Galactic Trade Council demanded tribute from humanity. We have paid that tribute in full. Any species that threatens human space in the future will receive the same payment. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. There will be only the choice between leaving us alone and joining your ships in the vacuum of space. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. They had saved humanity, but the cost had been enormous. Thousands of good people had died to win this freedom. Earth was safe, but the galaxy would never be the same. President Helen Carter's face appeared on the main screen, transmitting from the surface of Earth. Admiral Harper, on behalf of all humanity, I thank you and your brave crews. You have secured our future among the stars." "The future is what we make of it, Madam President," Lisa replied. "And we've made it clear that humans will not be slaves to anyone." As the human fleet regrouped around Earth, word of their victory spread through the galaxy. The Galactic Trade Council was broken, its fleets scattered, its authority shattered. Other species began to question the old order, wondering if they too could stand up to those who claimed to rule them. Humanity had demanded respect and paid for it with blood and courage. The galaxy had learned that when humans got angry, they didn't just fight back. They won.